Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NBA Trade Zone podcast, where we talk all things NBA trades, past, present, future. Hi, guys. My name is Daniel.
And I am Sebastian, and today we're going to continue our trade deadline preview. We're focusing on teams in the playoff position in the East and what are some trades they can make in order to improve their teams and their chances for the playoffs. Danny, is there a particular team you would like to get started with?
I guess we could get started with Milwaukee. It just recently got, as recent as yesterday, got reported Thon Maker has requested a trade out of Milwaukee. So, beyond Thon Maker here, I don't think there's any other moves Milwaukee should make. So before we touch on that, do you have any ideas for Milwaukee?
Well, we discussed Milwaukee a couple episodes ago. I don't have any moves for them to be made this before the offseason starts. So no trade deadline deals. I think Eric Bledsoe has actually improved his game, and he's been part of the more important part of the team. So I don't think getting rid of him right now would be a smart idea.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
And I think the more important thing is the cap space in the summer and see what they do. So I don't have any deals for them set up right now to be making in the trade deadline.
All right, so the one thing I guess to propose for anyone here, and I've heard this one thrown around a lot, is a Jason Smith and a second-round pick for Dwayne Dedmon. So I'm going to extend that out a little more. I think that Dwayne Dedmon would be a great fit there in Milwaukee, right off the bench behind Brook Lopez. He could hit some three-pointers, play good defense. And at this point, the one other thing, and now that Maker has requested a trade, I think would be perfect would be Thon Maker for Taurean Prince over there in Atlanta. I think Thon Maker could get a lot of time in Atlanta, and I think Taurean Prince would be a good fit in Milwaukee. So if you could add those two players, perhaps do a Dwayne Dedmon and a Taurean Prince for Thon Maker, Jason Smith, and a second-round pick or two second-round picks. Probably in the future, obviously, I don't think they'd want to be willing to take on 2019-20 when it would be 55, 56. I'm not even sure which of their second-round picks Milwaukee owns, but yeah, I would just go maybe two late 2023-24 second-round picks, where in Milwaukee might not be as good if I'm Atlanta. That's what I request.
Yeah, that deal doesn't sound like a bad idea, so I don't see why I would argue against it, actually, for both teams. I do find it pretty funny that Thon Maker has decided to, request a trade. He hasn't really done much.
Well, that's why. He hasn't been getting any playing time.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that who will want to actually trade for Thon Maker as well?
Well, it's going to be a team like that. Taurean Prince has apparently supposedly been on the trading block. Might as well take a flyer on a Thon Maker by trading Taurean Prince away from him. Obviously, you could probably ask for a second-round pick there in a separate trade as well if you're Atlanta. If you were just to do that, those two individuals for one another, you could probably request a second-round pick as well. So we can move on. Well, what team do you want to start with here?
All right, so we can just start with the other team in the East that's on the top right now. I have the Toronto Raptors. The trade I want to propose here, I don't actually think is going to happen, but I think it's an interesting thought process where the Raptors would receive Bradley Beal in a trade where they give up Valanciunas, Delon Wright, and the most important asset being there would be Pascal Siakam, who is coming into his own in kind of towards the end of his rookie contract. And I think this would be a good deal for Toronto right now because it kind of fits the timeline of where Toronto is at. Bradley Beal and Kawhi Leonard are at the pretty same age. Kyle Lowry is getting a little bit older. I do think that a backcourt of Bradley Beal, Kawhi, and Kyle Lowry would be really good. Bradley Beal is a really good defender as well, and he extends the floor. He's a better player than Danny Green at the starting shooting guard position. Now, losing Pascal Siakam, in my opinion, would hurt a little bit to the Toronto Raptors, but Bradley Beal is a better player, and overall, I do think this trade would make the team better. Danny, what are your thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, I still think, Washington is, I would probably say at this point, seemingly 99% not going to trade Bradley Beal as well, as they shouldn't. They've been good since Wall's gone out and Bradley Beal's taken over essentially as the primary playmaker. So why would they trade him? I believe it's 8-4 since he's gone, since Wall's gone down, or 7-4 in their last 11, 12 games. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but I don't see Bradley Beal being traded at all. Specifically, not only because they've been winning, but because of the way he's been playing as well as they've been winning. And with this proposal, you definitely still have to throw in something else if you're Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the deal. Obviously, they can't throw in this year's draft pick or next year's draft pick, so...
Yeah, I mean, earlier, I know a couple weeks ago, it was reported that Toronto was interested and Washington was asking for Siakam, Anunoby, and 2 first-round picks. That sounds more like a reasonable package, but at that point, I don't think Toronto... Well, of course, yeah, you probably have to add in a Valanciunas, obviously. But I think at that point, I don't think Toronto really would want to consider that too much because of as good as Siakam's been playing. And at this point, especially at that stage when Bradley Beal wasn't playing out of his mind like he is now. So, yeah, this trade would be nice for Toronto, but yeah, very highly unlikely. Like you said, like you mentioned, that's very highly unlikely.
And again, I don't think I don't have any, like, even if you substitute a DeLon Wright for an OG Anunoby, in my opinion, if the Wizards are willing to deal Bradley Beal, you still, I think if you're Toronto, you kind of have to take this swing because I think by trading for Bradley Beal, you kind of improve the opportunity of keeping Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, well, obviously yes, but again, yeah, I think Washington's made it pretty clear they're not going to trade Bradley Beal, so. Obviously, I don't think it's just not reasonable.
For Washington's perspective, I would say they're going to have to trade either John Wall or Bradley Beal. And I mean, from everything I heard, it's pretty hard to trade John Wall's contract.
I don't think they do. I don't think they have to trade both. You could trade Otto Porter.
But, I mean, the reason why they haven't been good has been that just Bradley Beal and John Wall haven't matched. It hasn't been Otto Porter's problem, in my opinion.
Plus, I think there will definitely be a team willing to take on John Wall, even if it is for nothing. Even if it's for nothing, I don't think they should trade Bradley Beal with the way he's been playing. Trust me, I've had my opinions about this. I thought Washington should rebuild, completely go out and just re-gut their roster. I've been pretty steadfast with that. Like that's what they should do. But I don't know. I guess I've changed course with my thought process here. I think, first of all, I think you will be able to get some type of return for John Wall. Definitely won't be a great one. I do think they'd be able to get some type of return for John Wall. But at this point, I think again, Bradley Beal is, the way he's been playing, he's become a good playmaker. Probably average to maybe a little bit above average defensively, but he's become a real good playmaker and he's always been a great scorer, and I think that's hard to find. And unless somebody really wows you with a package, I mean, you have the guy for 2 more years. What's the rush? There's no rush to trade him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as confident as you about them being able to trade John Wall. I mean, obviously his injury hasn't helped, and that means that next year, no one's going to trade for him at the start because they're going to want to see how he returns from the injury. So I do think that if there is a good package out there for decent prospects coming back for Bradley Beal. Now, I love Bradley Beal. I don't think the Wizards should also be trading, but if the package is right, and a Siakam and an Anunoby and maybe a pick, it's not a bad package. I mean, Siakam has really been a good player. He's good. In the East, he's a borderline All-Star this year. We don't know what's going to happen with OG and Anunoby. So that would be my argument there. I mean, unless the Lakers are willing to give something else up for Bradley Beal, it'd be hard to find a better option. And I just think some kind of change has to happen. And I don't think that trading Otto Porter is that change is going to happen. Okay, well, here's the trade I guess I would propose for Washington. And I'll come back to Toronto for a quick second. But here's a change that I would propose for Washington, a swing, I guess we could say, because this would be a risky move for Washington to make. Otto Porter, Satoransky, and Troy Brown, their first-round pick from this past year's draft, to Orlando for Vucevic, Terrence Ross, and a second-round pick. Jonathan Simmons would have to be included in a salary and a second-round pick. They take a swing here because obviously Vucevic could leave, but if they're able to resign Vucevic, if they're able to resign Terrence Ross off the bench, all of a sudden you got yourself a pretty solid big three there.
I mean, but why would Orlando make this deal? Orlando's trying to make the playoffs.
Yeah, but Orlando gets Otto Porter, who's been playing real good recently. Thomas Satoransky, who's a restricted free agent, who they could definitely use because he's been playing not pretty well. He's been playing really well since John Wall's gone out as well. You're getting two good young players who are both controllable in over the near future. So there is plus you're getting Troy Brown, who was the 15th pick in this past year's draft. Obviously, he hasn't played much in Washington, so he hasn't gotten a chance to prove himself. But you're getting three solid players in this deal.
Do you think making this trade makes the Wizards a better team?
Yes, I think it does make them better for this year. I think it probably makes them better for next year. And not only that, because we could argue whether Washington should rebuild, but from the outlook is that they're not going to rebuild, that they're going to want to take some kind of swing. And to your point about John Wall, I think there probably would even be teams willing to trade for him this summer. Now, again, like I said, the return would probably be minimal at best. However, I think Washington's going to be pretty stubborn about trading John Wall. And I think that's where the problem is going to come in. I mean, you could tell that they're stubborn about rebuilding, even though everyone and their mother knows that they've been a mediocre team for the last 3-4 years. But they've been stubborn about rebuilding, and it seems like they're going to be stubborn again, most likely with John Wall. They're going to command a package that they might not be able to get, seemingly just like the Cavaliers might be doing with Kevin Love.
All right. I don't necessarily think that trade makes the Wizards better, but yeah, I don't know for both teams. I mean, it seems like Orlando really is intent on keeping Vucevic. They like what they have with him.
Where'd you hear that?
From everything that I've heard on any podcast, it's that Orlando wants to make the playoffs this year, and Vucevic is part of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard a lot of different than that. I mean, I've heard that they're pretty much, I think, especially as the trade deadline comes closer, they'll be more and more willing to trade away Ross and Vucevic because they'll probably realize that they're not going to make the playoffs. And I know what you mean. I've also obviously heard that yes, they do want to make the playoffs, but at this point they don't seem likely to do so. And I think especially over the next week as the trade deadline gets closer, they're going to realize that they've got to do something. I mean, I'm sure they've probably got a handful of offers for Vucevic already on the table. They just have no reason. They have no reason to do it until literally probably a day or two or the day of the trade deadline because he's going to be a desired commodity just as much at the deadline as he is right now.
Well, I'm just coming from the perspective of them wanting to make the playoffs. So if they continue to want to make the playoffs, I don't see them trading Vucevic.
Well, of course, yeah, but I do think that is going to change course. I think a lot of teams have to say that yes, we're trying to make the playoffs. We're going to do anything to make the playoffs. And I think it's easy to tell which teams are doing it in a reasonable fashion and which aren't. Charlotte, for example, with Walker, I don't think Walker's going anyway. Even though a lot of people believe he should be traded, even though that's popular opinion, I don't think Walker's going anyway. That seems like a legitimate push from Charlotte to make the playoffs. But with Orlando, I think that you'd hope Orlando realizes that they're the ones who probably should trade Ross and Vucevic before they lose them for nothing.
Okay, do you have any Raptors deals?
Yes, I think a reasonable person that they could, a reasonable player that they could look at is Marc Gasol. And I don't think the reason why I think he's logical for them is because you won't have to give up a lot. I think a package of Norman Powell and Vucevic, Valanciunas. Yeah, Norman Powell and Valanciunas, maybe a second-round pick. Not maybe, throw in a future second-round pick, probably in the far future as well. I think that's reasonable. That's a reasonable package for Marc Gasol. Seemingly, his trade value is pretty low, all things considered, especially because of his impending potential free agency. I mean, if he decides to decline his player option, his trade value is pretty low from everything I'm hearing. And Valanciunas is a young, solid player, never going to be a difference maker. I don't think anyone expects him to be a difference maker. He's been in the league for a while, but he's only, I believe, 26, at most 27. And Norman Powell, same. I mean, he hasn't been as impactful as he was 2 years ago for Toronto, but he's still a young player who has some potential. And I think a team like Memphis could use a couple of those types of players in a deal for Marc Gasol, considering that they probably won't get a better sorry, I shouldn't say a better return. There might be a team willing to offer more, but that they won't get much in terms of trade value, much more in terms of trade value.
I mean, if this trade